Greetings, humans.
Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse, where we share the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We hope you find this conversation interesting and uplifting. Our goal is to bring people together, so if you enjoy the interview, we'd love to hear your comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Myron Dyal is a mystic, artist, and musician who experiences visions that are a result of temporal lobe epilepsy. This condition is the catalyst for his art. Each piece is a record of a vision that has occurred during some event, and he has over 5,000 drawings, paintings, and sculptures.
Myron was in a coma at 4 years old, and when he awoke, his mind was erased. He began to have visions which have continued to the present day. Myron expressed himself through his music until he began creating art in the late 1970s. He started with journals and then later began to draw, paint, and sculpt, taking inspirations from long walks through the mountains. He went public with his art in 2005.
Take a look at Myron's art on his website or his Facebook page. We hope you enjoy the interview.
And the Manson family used to live here.
Oh, wow.
In fact, they're right up the street here. They were in a park not a mile from me. In fact, I met a bunch of them years ago. And I didn't know they were the Manson family. They were just hippies. But the rocks and the topography of Chatsworth goes back millions and millions and millions of years. And the Indians that used to live here, the Chumash, created an immense history of this area before the Spanish came and killed them all. Every time they do a documentary about this area, they start with the Spanish as if the Indians never lived here. You know, and they lived here for thousands of years, and especially this area. And in fact, one place on Stony Point, which is if you just put in Stony Point on Google, and it comes up, they put 4 stars rocks. They carved them into these. And when I used to go up there to meditate, I said, well, I think I'll sit in the middle of these 4 rocks and see if I get any energy out of it. Sure enough, it was really powerful. I mean, so there's a lot of historical metaphysical information and connections here with the past, with MASH. And I lived all the way north, almost to San Francisco, and they were all killed by the Spanish by putting in their missions.
Just to ask real quick, have you ever heard of the bilocating nun? It was a nun who prayed really hard up in Spain and had visions of ministering to what ended up being native tribes. And then later on, Spanish explorers met the tribes and they're like, yeah, we knew about you guys already. We talked to the nun. Have you ever heard of that?
Actually, I have heard of the bilocating young. I've heard of that, but my visions, I have visions because I have temporal lobe epilepsy. In other words, I have a brain tumor that produces imagery. It's in the left hippocampus, and it changes the reality perception in my brain, just like DMT does, but better than DMT, and with less side effects in some ways. You know that in the gland, everybody has DMT in their pineal gland, and it covers your brain. They have the MRIs of it. When I was 4 years old, I was in a coma for 4 months, and when I came out of that coma, I didn't know my parents. I didn't know anyone. The only thing that penetrated the coma was my musical abilities. That was it. There was nothing else. Everything else was wiped out. And so I was a stranger in a strange land. I didn't have any connection with anyone except in the recovery room after 4 months. My spirit guide, who I call Charon, was standing in the room. And it came over to me after the doctors left and said, "I'm here to protect you and help you on your journey." And that's all she said. Charon comes as a female, a male, or just a spirit. So, but I see Charon the way I see anything, and any what you would call reality. And she's been with me for, well, since I was 4, and I'm 81, so you do the math. And somehow Charon knows the future, which is very, very, very interesting. We'll discuss that, but she has never been wrong about anything that was going to happen in my life, ever. From the most banal stuff to the most profound, she has never been wrong. And that means that either the future already exists, or there's a way to jump ahead and check and look at the future. And I have witnesses of predictions that she's made that I told them in advance, in some cases just 24 hours in advance, and they came true. So it isn't just my opinion, they're actual witnesses to that. And I was on the board of directors of the Epilepsy Foundation here in the national group about 10 years. And they've made progress in the last 50, 60 years, but not much. About epilepsy and 9 different kinds of epileptic seizures. Most people think of the drop seizures, but the fact are there are many, many, many seizures of different types. And most shamans have epilepsy, almost all of them. They ran tests on a host of shamans in South America and various places, and that they all have epilepsy. And
wow, I never knew
there's
that.
nothing new about that. And it's only in the Christian world that epileptics were demon possessed. Taoists to change that, to take it out of the Bible, take it out of the Christian Bible. And if that went to the Vatican, and the Vatican agreed to take that out of the Bible, that epilepsy has nothing to do with demon possession. But so anyway, my whole life was music. It was all music. That's all I did was play. I played the violin, the viola, the piano. I wrote music. All my degrees are in music. All my college degrees are in music. But I got hurt in the military and I couldn't play anymore. And that's when I turned to drawing, which I had never done. I didn't know how to draw. I never had drawn anything in my life. I could barely draw a stick drawing.
Can I interject for a second, Myron?
Yeah, go. Sure.
So you had the brain tumor, you were in a coma for 4 months, and when you came out of it, you were 4 years old, correct? And then so I was wondering if you could talk us through the recovery afterwards and getting used to the new version of you, and how long it took you to get used to it and have a spirit guide and all that stuff. And then if you could transition that into how the heck did you end up in the military after all that? I'd love to understand. I'm a veteran as well. I'm an Army veteran as well. So
yeah, I heard that, and I was watching one of your podcasts, especially when
yes,
I know Mike really well, so.
Great guy.
Yeah, I can explain it to you. It's a wonderful guy. We've been friends for a long time. In fact, he put me as part of the introduction to one of his books because I get a review of it. Anyway, the thing, talking about 1945, 46, when this happened. So they didn't know anything about. They didn't have MRIs, they didn't have PET scans, they didn't have any technology at all to ascertain, experience, or determine, no matter what the situation was. They only went by anecdotal information and visual collapse. So in my case, my my mother said that I was one way before the coma, and when I was after the coma, I was different. I was a completely different person. The only thing that penetrated it was music, because music is in a different part of the brain than the visual cortex. The visual cortex is in the left hemisphere, and the music's in the right hemisphere. Anyway, the way I got through childhood was with Charon, not my parents, because my parents beat me almost to death, actually, because they thought I was demon possessed. They were religious fanatics, and they thought that I was demon possessed, so they were correcting me. And it didn't work, of course, because it was epilepsy and not demon possession. And I had to start hiding from them my seizures, and I would hide from them, and then and have the seizure there. And sometimes you lose control of your body and all kinds of stuff. And I had to take my clothes and clean them, and then pretend like nothing happened. Well, there's a preictal part of a seizure and a postictal. The preictal is an anticipation of a seizure, and in fact, there are animals that can smell it. They know that you're going to have a seizure before you have. And then there's the actual seizure itself, and then there's the postictal. That's the part after the recovery. And I didn't know if you have an illness or a condition, and you think everybody's young. I mean, why would you think differently? I mean, and my seizures were showing me other landscapes and other beings that Charon would take me to, especially during the abuse when I was getting beaten. She would take me on this big black crow, and we would fly across this beautiful landscape. It's in my film that I did, and then I would come back when my dad was finished beating on me and be restored. And they could never have gotten away with what they did to me today. I mean, there would be a social worker there in 20 minutes, and that would be the end of it. But the fact is, Charon would teach me slowly and that I could handle at certain ages. And I was very for my age, and there's a reason for that. That's a pretty long story, but the fact is that I never listened to children's music. I was listening to classical music. I was listening to jazz. I was playing the violin when I was 6 and 7 years old. I just loved the violin. I loved the sound. And so I had like two different lives. There was one on the extroverted side that I call my avatar, which is kind of talking to you now. I mean, what's talking to you right now is the avatar. The internal part of me that's Charon related is not talking to you directly, because it's just not going to do that. And so I learned very quickly to shut up about seeing, talking to Charon, going to places, going to magical worlds, going to other worlds, finding out that I was from another planet called Zelkon. And it wasn't until I started reading Jung that Jung was adamant about the kind of wounded egos and brains and the companion, as called them. The companion, Jung had a companion book. There's a famous red book, if you know what that is. But in the famous red book, Jung writes about his companion called Philemon. And Philemon got him through 10 years of a whole psychic break that he had between his wife supporting him and the 10 years of his psychic break. He wrote the Red Book, and they edited a lot of stuff out of the Red Book, copy of that. And that's illegal. And the fact is that he believed that damaged egos will produce a companion that is on a higher nature than the nature of the damaged ego. Now, I don't totally concur with that hypothesis, but it's a good explanation of scientists. I mean, when I was on the board, when I'm talking to them, I would talk science. When I'm talking to mystics, I talk mythological stuff, because I don't believe that what Jung said is actually a fact. I think that there's more going on here. Just a undifferentiated part of yourself that turns into a companion to get you through the day. I think that's a little simplistic. I love Jung's stuff. I read all of his books, all 30 of them. And I was a big Jungian for a long time, but then I realized that I had to let that go. I had to move on to my own process. But anyway, the point is that when you have a illness, you have to keep quiet. Like let's say you're gay, but you don't even know what gay is. That you're attracted to men or something, or you're a girl and you're attracted to women. But you don't know what that is intellectually. You just know that you have this feeling. Well, the same thing's true if you have a perennial illness. You think, well, everybody must have this, so you're pretty open about it. When I was in school, you went from grammar school to junior high school to high school, and it was the same people, because we lived in one town. We all went to the same schools. So they saw me have seizures, and when I was young, they saw me have seizures when I was in high school, and they stopped when I was about 15. The grand mal ones, the tonic-clonic ones, the most famous ones where you drop seizures, and that's how I got in the military. So
that's what I was wondering. You must not have told them about that.
Oh, I tried everything. I tried that. Look, I had epilepsy my whole life, and they said, "So what? I mean, do you have epilepsy now?" And I said, "Won't." I mean, the grand mal stopped when I was like 14, and they said, "Well, that's not relevant to anything. They're looking for cannon fodder, so what do they care?" And so I passed the physical and got into the military. And
you were drafted?
That didn't go too well, but that story. No, I joined the reserves. Now that's another Charon story. I was in.
Okay, we'd love to hear it.
I was in junior college, and I was bored, and I didn't know what I was doing. I really don't know what I was doing. I was having so many visions that I was more interested in recording them than dealing with just what I thought was nonsense. And so one day, Charon comes to me and let's take a drive. Now, when Charon tells me to do something, I do it. So I got in the car and we took this long drive in Los Angeles. It takes you down to the beach, and the beach can take you all the way south near North San Diego, and then you can come back, and then you can go inland to a street called Crenshaw. And by the time we'd done that, it'd been like 2 hours of driving. And Charon said, "Stop at that donut there and get a coffee." So I said, "Okay, great." So I stopped and got a coffee and a muffin, and she said, "Look across the street." So I looked across the street, and there was a military base called 163rd Signal Battalion, and it was part of Fort MacArthur. I went, yeah. So she said, go on over there. Just go on over there and sign up. Now, remember, this is when everyone into the reserves. They were trying to get into the National Guard so they didn't have to go to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody. There was waiting people to get into the reserves or to get into. So there were no openings at all, period. So Charon takes me to this place and says, go on in there. So I went in. I went into the day room, and the sergeant came up, and I said, you guys don't have any innings, would you? You know, at first I thought he was just going to laugh at me and throw me out the door. And he said, you know, it's funny. We had a person just roll off their 6-year obligation. He just left. I mean, 20 minutes ago. Yeah, we have an opening. Do you want it? I said, yeah, I want it. So I joined the reserves. Now, this was in 1964. This is before Johnson sent 500,000 Marines to Vietnam. So the war wasn't even started yet. And but people were still trying to get in the reserves in the National Guard. So I signed up, and I was in the military. And I went to radio school, and Morse code is all rhythm. I was in a 6 program. I think I learned all of the Morse code in, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, because it's all rhythm. If you understand rhythm, they always ask new recruits, are you a musician? Do you know anything about music? And if you do, they'll put you in the signal corps immediately, because they know you're going to learn Morse code in half the time. I was done with the whole program in 6 weeks. And so the last 13 weeks, I just helped other people. And then they put me in an advanced course. And interestingly enough, my father always had a top secret clearance his whole career. He worked for Douglas, but he also worked at Area 51. And so we were always investigated. Every adult life, we were investigated. The FBI came to all our neighbors' house. Hey, what do you think of the Dyals? How are they? Are they nice people? Blah, 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 blah. You know, things out. And I got my clearance in, 3 weeks. I had a top secret clearance in 3 weeks. That's not done. That's because they already had all the data. As soon as they looked it up, they went, oh, this guy. This is the son of Homer K. Dyal, works at Area 51. So there's no problem there. Now, my dad, he never, ever mentioned Area 51.
Okay.
I must tell you that. But other in code that he was going to go to Area 51. He would call her up and he'd say, we're going to have spaghetti for dinner. And that means he was going to go to Area 51 for a day. He didn't know how long. And he would go to Las Vegas on a flight order, and he would change to the plane that goes to Area 51. Yeah. And the only reason I even know this is when, after he passed away, we were going through his papers, and he forgot to destroy a travel order to Area 51 that was said top secret, destroy at the top. He just forgot to get rid of it. And I read all the data on there, which I will not repeat, but there was all this data on there. And that's how I knew I know he worked on the Saturn missile, because I love with von Braun. He just loved the guy. And I used to get in arguments with him constantly about von Braun. I mean, he was responsible for the death of millions of people, personally responsible. And but of course, the Russians would have got him if we didn't get him. So but my dad worshipped von Braun. He worked for him every day of his life, and thought he was, the cat's pajamas. Well, maybe he was, but a murderer. But you could say that about Einstein too, and you could say that about Oppenheimer and all the atomic bomb people. So I think over a long period of time, ego builds whatever ego it can. All right. If it's more or less normal, then it's normal, and normal is in quotes term. Normal is whatever is acceptable in the culture that you live in. And if you live outside of that culture, then maybe the normal isn't what you think it is. Subsequently, I built up two egos. Avatar that's talking to you now, and the other one was this one that takes all these trips to Zelkon and other places that were pretty constant, actually. My recall of all of the visitations to all the places that Charon used to take me to is more intact than my actual, quote, avatar memory, which is very bad. I had to keep everything written down to remember it. I just could not remember it. I could not. And I was a vice president of a corporation. I was vice president in two big companies that we built, and I took care of all the Burbank, all the studios, Burbank Studios, Paramount, MGM. All of those were my customers. Creative Artists Agency, which represents everybody in the country. I knew those guys personally. I went to their homes. So, it was an interesting career. It was all telecommunications, and everybody needs a phone.
Did that start with the Signal Corps? Did being so proficient in the Signal Corps somehow lead down the road to getting connected with all these telecom people?
Yeah, I mean, the education that I got from just doing Morse code, it was all the radio procedure, and then of course there was the top secret stuff and crypto and all that. I had to learn all that stuff in the Army, and so by the time I got out of the Army and got out, I kind of got out of the Army and out of college at the same time in 1971. Mm-hmm. I kind of was ejected from both of them. But by that time, my music stuff was over because I was hurt so bad. It was wounded. I was pretty bad. And I was in Vietnam. And
you were wounded in combat in Vietnam?
Well, yeah, in a matter of speaking, it was a classified mission that I'm not going to talk about, and because I'm scared to talk about it, because I got nailed by talking about it back in the 70s. But anyway, the point was that I got hurt, and it was pretty severe, and none of it is unclassified. It's all classified. And the men that were with me, I don't think this is classified. We're all senior officers from World War II. And I was just a radio guy along with them, just to transmit data. That's all I was supposed to do. And that's all I did.
A hot shot
and
guy.
What?
I was saying, lucky you. You're a hotshot radio guy. You got to go in with some of the senior guys and see stuff. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, I don't know how lucky I was because I had a nice. What happened was that I got called up like 3 or 4 times in the 6 years that I was in the reserves. First, I got called up for the Watts riots here in Los Angeles. And so we had to walk up and down the street and protect the firemen from getting shot. So we had to do, and then I got called up for more disciplinary stuff in universities, trying to control the crowds of the anti-war movement and the women's movement and all of that stuff. And then I got called up just to go to Fort Ord to take the place of a guy who was going to be shipped to Vietnam. And I wasn't going to be shipped to Vietnam. I was just supposed to take his place. And so that's what I did. And it's a 12-hour on, 12-hour off shift. That's what it is. And so, and it was only supposed to be 6 months. That was it. It's a little game they play. If they call you up for 6 months and you don't go to the 6 months in a day, they don't have to put that in as part of your legation record. You don't get anything for it. You're just, if they were to call me up for a year, then I would get a lot of benefits and stuff. But that's the game they played. Well, anyway, so what happened was that they needed another guy to go to Saigon, so I got called up and sent to Saigon. That's a big story too, and it was all because I had this top secret clearance. And all I did was go to work, go in an office, listen to what they were saying over the radio wire integration that they had going. That was the whole technology they had. And I was listening to commanders in the field, talking to the senior commanders, and listen to everything they said. And then if they sent it in code, then I had to copy that down. If they sent it in key, then I had to key it. If they sent it in voice, then I heard it in voice. And that's all I did. I was just doing that. I did that for like 4 months. And so it was a pretty easy gig. And, and the office was fairly, was air conditioned, not for the soldiers, but for the equipment. So they didn't care about the soldiers much, but they cared about the equipment. So, and then one day I got called in by this guy, this colonel. And if you've been in the military, bird colonels, if you're just a specialist, you just don't, there are not that many of them around. And so he told me that I got assigned to this task force. And that's as much I'll say about that. It's all top secret, and it is still top secret. So I don't talk about what happened. But the fact is that I went with these 4 guys that were all senior. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they're dead. Well, they're dead now, but because they would be 100 years old. But back then, I don't know what happened to them. I never saw them again. Their names are not on the wall because I went and looked. And I don't think those were their names. I think those were fake names. I think the ranks were true, but I think that their names were false because they didn't want me knowing their names or anything about it. And they're pretty nice guys, actually. The junior officer, the captain, was the nicest guy. The senior guy, the major and the colonel were not so nice. But anyway, so I got out of the military, and then there's a long story in that decade, getting out of high school and getting out of the military and getting out of college. I was on a very, very strong drug, Valium, which no one had heard of. When my doctor gave me Valium, it wiped out my visions. It just wiped them out. I didn't see Charon for a whole decade because, and I was taking 40 milligrams a day. That's a lot of Valium. I don't know if you know how much that is, but that's a lot of Valium. But it got me through a divorce. It got me through the Army. It got me through college, all the way to 1971. And then I just decided I didn't need it anymore. And I threw it away and I stopped taking it. And all of my visions came back. Bam, immediately. Especially one that where I saw this. I was in the, what?
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, did Charon ask where you had been? And did you have any like breakthrough moments during those 10 years while you were in the military? You had maybe dreams with Charon or anything, or was completely absent so long as you were on the medication?
No, that's not how Charon works. First of all, Charon never judges anything on a negative basis, ever. There is no negative with Charon. No matter what you do, there is no negative. He represents, or it represents, absolute love, and none of us are capable of that. Unconditional love is a joke. There's a condition on love. Everybody has a condition on love. I mean, there isn't anyone who doesn't have a condition. Anyway, Charon never brings up my negative, and God knows I the stuff, but she never brought it up. We have work to do today. Let's go do it, and then we would go do that work. So when I came out of it, nothing had happened. Like that decade hadn't happened, and I had some seizures in the military anyway, or visions, if you want to call them that. I think that they were more visionary than they were seizure related, but that's a subjective analysis. And I mean,
would you mind sharing about those visions?
If I'm talking to a neurologist, oh no,
sorry,
I'll tell you about him. I was at Fort Ord one day, and they were using it to test artillery and stuff, and blast into the ocean because it sits right on the ocean. Every fort that the military ever bought was right in strategies that everybody would want to live in. So Fort Ord is right north of Monterey, and it's beautiful. It sits right north of Monterey. It's gone now. I mean, it's closed. And then, anyway, so one day I was just walking in the afternoon on a Sunday, and I kept seeing soldiers running by, just like platoons of soldiers. And I thought, these guys are out doing this on Sunday, but they had the wrong uniforms on, like World War uniforms. And I went, man, this isn't. And I have a kind of sense that the world that I'm looking at is not the world that you would be seeing. It's just, I just have it. And I thought, oh, I'm seeing something here that isn't present tense, past tense. And I remember one time when I was in the VA hospital, which is in Los Angeles, the street from an old recovery part of the military, where veterans used to be locked up for life after fighting because they did not recover mentally. There's been 300 of them there at some times, and then right across the street there's a big hospital. So I was an outpatient at that hospital, and I kept seeing Civil War soldiers, camped in this open green space. And I thought, what the hell is that? Reenactors, you know what those are, right? And so I thought they were reenacting, but they weren't reenacting. They were actual Civil War soldiers that I was looking at. They were recovering. Some of them had legs, some of them arms. They didn't know I was there, and they didn't see me, but I saw them. And then it hit me that I was really seeing a vision. So yeah, I've seen visions there, and then at Fort Ord, and then in basic training, they were fucking with us, and we were just—I won't say fucking when we're alive, but they were fucking with us, and we were just walking around in a circle. After marching 20 miles, we were just marching around in a circle. Just the DIs just wanted to scream. I lost it. I didn't know what day it was. I had no idea what was going on. And I went over to the DI. I don't recommend this. I went over to the DI and my stuff, and I threw my rifle and my pack at his feet, just bam, like that. Fuck you! I am done with this. And I don't even know that I saw him really. And he took one look at me, and he was smart enough to know what's wrong with this guy. He's not doing this out of rebellion. There's something else going on. It's heat. Because we'd marched 25 miles, and then we were still walking around. So he thought it was just like, so he said, Dyal, get over there and get under that tree, and I'll come over and talk to you. Just get over, get your stuff, and go over the tree. I couldn't see him. I could hear him, but I couldn't see him. And I can remember what he said, but I don't remember seeing him. So I got over the tree, and then he came over and he said, here, drink some water, not too much, just a little bit, you know. And then he said, look, you don't have to walk back. You can drive back with Sergeant. And I said, fine, that's fine. And I apologized. I said, you know, I'm really sorry. You know, I don't know what happened. And he goes, it's okay. So, but at this time at Fort Ord, soldiers were dying of meningitis. We had 1,500 soldiers die of meningitis at Fort Ord, and they finally closed the fort for 2 years or 18 months or something, and then they reopened it when the meningitis virus finally dissipated. But so everybody working on, they were all walking on eggshells about treatment of soldiers, and but I remember what all the things that he said. He said a bunch of stuff to me that I don't remember, and I was out of it for about 8 hours. Sometimes it can be 8 hours that I'm out, which means that I don't see reality for about 8 hours. Now, how that would translate, well, you can guess. It wouldn't work. But I didn't know, you know, that this was preventative. I didn't really know, you know, because no one had ever told me anything. So
Right.
The next day I was fine, you know, and I went back out, you know, doing my calisthenics and training and shot expert and qualified for the infantry, and then found out my MOS was Signal Corps, which they sent me there to be the Signal Corps unit anyway. So they couldn't have changed my MOS if they wanted to. And then I left Fort Ord and was transferred to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where I learned all the telecom stuff. Got a question, it looks like.
Oh yeah, I was muted. I was wondering if you were if you had went to Fort Gordon, because that's where I know modern day. That's where all the Signal Corps is. That's Fort Gordon in Georgia. Did you do your training there?
After the 14-week training I did at Fort Jackson, they transferred me to for some specialized encrypted kind of stuff, schooling that I had to learn. Take the advanced course in Morse code and key and all that shit, and I had to go to jump school, which I wasn't expecting. And so I jumped out of a plane. So that was that. I mean, that was kind of fun.
Yeah, and so you must have done that at Bragg or something here in Georgia as well, or the jump school. Where's
no,
that
just
at?
Fort Gordon.
Okay.
I was still at Fort Gordon, and then they shipped us off to a place to do the actual jump. But I don't remember. I don't remember when or where that was. I don't remember very much about it, if you want to know the truth. I mean, it was 60 years ago.
My military experience
it was a long
was
time, but
20 years ago, I went to Iraq. I remember little things about it, but not a whole lot. I remember little flashes of basic training
Yeah,
occasionally.
right.
But the people that I knew then, I don't even remember their names. I can barely remember their faces, if at all. So I totally get
No,
it.
no, I have
So
I have my
between the
graduation book. Go ahead.
Yeah, same.
between the military and the telecom, I think I heard you mention in another interview you went to seminary for a while and pursued becoming a minister. Was that a chapter in between
Well,
there somewhere?
I, I was always in the church from the Exorcist days all the way through. I was in my early 20s. I was always a churchgoer. I wasn't a Christian necessarily. Friends were in the church. All my girlfriends were in the church. I was in the choir. I was in the orchestra. Um, my whole life evolved around the church. All my other friends, they were either jocks or, Fonzie characters or something. But I was in acting and in theater, and I was in the church. And then I became youth pastor. I was elected youth pastor, so I had to give sermons every once in a while, which sometimes they liked and sometimes they didn't like. Because I believed about Christianity and they didn't, because I was really into Gnosticism at the time. Because I started reading really early, very, very kids would never touch. Like I read the Bhagavad Gita when I was old. I mean, I just loved it. I started reading it and I just couldn't put it down. And then I started reading the I Ching about the same time. And interestingly enough, the version of the I Ching that I have, Jung wrote the introduction to that book. It's the Wilhelm translation, where he went to China and stole it because it was forbidden to be taken out of China. Took the text and then translated it, and then Jung wrote the introduction, and then they published it on the his label, Bowling Gym, and in Sweden. And when I read the introduction, I did what Jung said. Jung asked the I Ching, "Okay, how do I use you? What do I do? Tell me." And so that's what I did. I asked the I Ching, "How do I use you?" And I didn't use the stocks. There's the stocks, which is a pretty famous thing, but it's very complicated. And I was only 11 years old. I couldn't figure out those stocks if I tried. I had 3 coins that I'd gotten out of the ocean, 3 nickels that I still have. And if you go down and you just look at the tide, you can see the coins flipping in the tide as it goes out. I just picked up 3 coins over a couple of days, and I've used those 3 coins for the hexagrams that I threw for all these years, and then I started using the tarot cards later. I didn't like the tarot cards so much because there was so much theology in them, so much Christianity in them, and so much Western thought. I always thought that the Eastern way of looking at reality was much more interesting, because there seemed to be no particular God, and the absence of all that authority was very appealing to somebody like me, who was pretty much a rebellion person anyway. And I mean, I read Lao Tzu. I loved Lao Tzu. I thought Lao Tzu was wonderful. But anyway, so I studied the I Ching in depth, and Confucius, and Confucius was more like the moralist, and then the mystic was more like Lao Tzu. Nobody really knows who wrote the whole I Ching anyway, and it's not a book that is locked into time. You know how the Old Testament and the New Testament are locked into what the church dictated that they would be. And the Dead Sea Scrolls are not part of that. So, because, well, we're not going to include that. Well, that's not how the Chinese think. They think that way. If somebody has a vision and they're going to add it, they'll add it because they're not afraid of it. It's just another insight as far as they're concerned. That's true with Hinduism too, by the way, especially Hinduism. Nobody's afraid of somebody having a revelation in the 21st century. If they want to have a revolution and write it down, it's broken to the to the Hindus. So anyway,
it sounds like it. I wanted to ask, I guess, more about your relationship with Charon, as much as you're willing to share. So I noticed you referred to it as him, but then it. Also, I want to know: is it a telepathic conversation? Are you having a conversation in your mind when you're talking to them, or and how does it have male and female qualities? I'm really just curious about Charon in general.
Charon comes in those three ways: the male, the female, and the anima, animus. That's the Jungian terms. Yep. And then the actual spiritual part. It's just ethereal. It's just energy, just pure energy. Because I believe in cosmic consciousness. I don't believe in God. I believe in cosmic consciousness. And if you want to call that God, be my guest. Anyway, because I don't tell people what to think. But anyway, the point is that Charon is always with me. She's here now. She's standing right there.
Oh wow!
And she's as real as you guys are, or maybe even more real, since you're online and she's standing right there. But I get, she comes and goes, or it comes and goes, and but she's always around. She's always around. It's always around, even in ethereal ways. I know that she's present. Yeah, especially when things are particularly bad. If I'm sick or going through something, then she's around quite a bit. And then she has things for me to do. We've been on a journey together since I was 4 years old. So, based on my age, she would reveal things to me. I remember one time I asked her, I was about 12 or 13 or something. And I said, what happens after you die? She must know she's an eternal being, right? So what's the fucking answer? I'm not going to say that on live, okay? And we used to have a kind of familiarity with each other, like friends. But when she got serious, or it got serious, it was serious. And she would make the differential. This is serious. We're going to do this, and it's serious. Everything else we would joke around like friends do. So when you have a companion, like Jung talks about, that only has your best interest at heart. I was on a podcast with Anthony Peake. I don't know if you know who that is. But Anthony and I did a 4-hour podcast the other one time. It's on my website. And some woman asked me, how do you know that this creature is not a demon? How do you know that? I mean, how do you know that it's not there to destroy you rather than to build you up? And there's an old Gnostic expression: if you bring forth what's within you will save you. If you don't bring forth what's within you will destroy you. So it's right at the top of Gospel according to to one of them. I can't remember which one. I think it's well, anyway. So I told her, I said, the proof is in the pudding. The nature of a being, any being, has a basic nature. So Charon could never, ever go against its own basic nature. For instance, if Charon was a demon, its nature would be demonic, negative, in other words, as the I Ching would say. It would be negative. Everything would be pointed towards negativity. Even in the most subtle, most beautiful ways, it would still be moving that direction. Whether it was social or musical or artistic or whatever it was, that's where it would be headed. In Charon's case, that never happens. Never. She is never, ever negative about anything. I mean, she's never, ever condemned me. She's a lot better than the Old Testament God, I'll tell you that right now. I mean, he's pissed off, but I mean, he murdered the whole world except 8 people. So anyway, so I told her, I said, the proof is in the fact that Charon can't go against its own nature, and its nature is pure love. So if that's your nature, you can't deviate from that, even 1%. You can't. It's impossible, and that's her nature. So she's always, even though she can be very, very tough, very tough. Like she didn't answer the question about what happens, after you die. She said, that's not for you to know, and it's not time for you to know. I'll tell you when it's time. It'll be on my schedule, not your schedule. And I got a lot of those because the human ego, wants answers to everything. And then they want to put all those answers in a little box. Kind of like science. Science wants to put everything into a little box. I mean, I was working with Oliver Sacks. I don't know if you know who that is, but Oliver Sacks was a famous neurologist who wrote some great books. In fact, he wrote a whole book on hallucinations, which Anthony referred to. And but anyway, the point was, when people say, "Oh, well, it's just a hallucination you're having," yeah. So what is that? If it's just a hallucination, then tell me what a hallucination is. Well, you can't tell me because you don't know. Nobody knows what a hallucination is. Nobody. So it's just a word that science uses to just lock everything down. They were doing that with epilepsy for generations. And then they realized, oops, we've made some mistakes. Like there are terminal seizures they didn't know existed. Until when I was on the board in the 80s, they discovered this thing called sudden death epilepsy syndrome, which is now everywhere. They have now posted it at every place. They didn't know it existed, or they were in denial about it. And finally, at a meeting we had in New York, we were debating whether that information should be released to the public, because it's a very scary thing to tell your family that your child or your husband or whoever could die of epilepsy anytime it wants. That's a very scary thing to say. Now, it doesn't affect all people with epilepsy, but certain kinds of epilepsy. And so we debated whether we should talk about it. I said, hey, guys, I know you're the doctors, but that's total bullshit. You've got to tell the public. You've got to let them know that it kills 250,000 people a year. Are you kidding me? And you're not going to tell anyone? That can't happen. So they voted on it, and then it went public overnight. And then all the doctors were saying, when they were writing obituaries, they were saying this person died of sudden death epilepsy syndrome. And what it does is there's a gene in your brain, and when you trigger that gene, it tells your heart to shut off. while you're having the seizure, because your whole body is an electrical system. And when it breaks. That's the seizure. And then it comes back together, and that's the recovery. Well, if that recovery doesn't reoccur, if that gene doesn't tell your heart to come back on, you're dead. That's it. You're gone. And so now it's a recognized condition called sudden death epilepsy syndrome. And then there was a thing called status epilepticus that nobody knew anything about either. And that's another one that extends seizures out. Usually past 5 minutes, you're dead. If it goes 5 minutes or more, you're just not going to make it, or you're going to have total brain damage. Well, they didn't even know what that was, and they weren't sure that was true. And then they discovered this thing they called status epilepticus, which advances the seizure into a more lengthy process. Plus, it's not uncommon for epileptics to have visions. It's very common. I remember when I first joined the support group, I had joined the Epilepsy Foundation board, and I thought, well, if I'm on the board, I should go to some of the support groups and see what kind of work we're doing, since we're paying people to do these things. So I went to the group, and there's a whole group of people. There's like 25 people there, but they were mostly people who didn't work, who didn't drive, kind of, people that lived at home. And I was, here I am dressed in a 3-piece suit, and what the fuck am I doing here? Listening to them talk about their problems. And then all of a sudden they were talking about stuff about what was going on in their brain that was going on in my brain. And I thought, wait a minute, how could they know that? How could they know that about me? And I haven't told them. So there was a connection between the epilepsy and the visions and all the rest of it. It's all connected into this cosmological event that we call a seizure. And since shamans have them, and even though they take psychotropic drugs, and a lot of them, they have seizures, no question about it. And when you're in that state, the thing about me that they wanted to study, and they did study at Johns Hopkins, was I would have the seizure, which usually can only last a minute or two. I mean, it doesn't last very long. But for 8 or 9 hours, I would not be able to see the world the way you see it. Like, this room wouldn't be here. This room would be completely gone. And another thing would be here, a tree or rocks or another place. And I would be in that place for 6 or 7 or 8 hours. And that's a long time to be out. And it kind of dawned on me later on when I was studying physics that since the universe is made up of particles, and those particles create, an opposite negative impulse, so they can stay, stay apart. Otherwise, the whole universe just disappears. Somehow, when I'm having these events, the world flips over and changes and opens. My mind opens to more reality, kind of like with DMT or ayahuasca or any of the rest of the psychotropic stuff. I've had all those, and I didn't see anything in those that I don't see normally. So I don't take drugs. I don't need them. After all, the brain is, it reduces reality to something that will work so you can function. Because after all, I mean, if your brain was unlimited, you could never function. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't do anything. You'd have to sit like the shamans in a room and just sit there. Or like the monks in India, when I was in India, I was looking at some monks that were just sitting and meditating, and that's all they do. They just sit and meditate. Well, that's fine, but if you're working in a business, you can't do that. So, so I think that the reductive element of the brain and its need to control reality so you can function can be expanded either by yourself, by meditation. I mean, David Lynch talked about it in a lot in his podcasts. I don't know, David Lynch, the director, and because he used meditation to open his mind in all kinds of areas. Well, I don't need to open my mind. I meditate every day, like 2 hours, but I don't need it for that particular function. But when I'm out, this world is completely gone. It's not here. And when I'm on Zelkon, which is even another planet, it's not even this planet. It's in Orion's belt. It's the third star, the one that's that's out of line for the other two. There's three big ones, and it's the third one. There's a planet around that star. Now, if that goes nova, I don't know what happens to Zelkon if that happens, but that's not my problem. Since time to me is not linear. There is no time. There's now, and that's it. There is no time. Time is made up by us. We limit our own ability to function in the universe by saying time is this long or this short, and it's a mythology. I mean, most of how we live is a mythology that we've created for ourselves by necessity. And so to tell me that what I have is mythological, well, that's great if you want to say that. But the fact is, the way you live is just as mythological as mine. You're just accepted yours, and I've accepted mine, and mine has these other aspects. I'm not talking about you particular. I'm talking about you, the audience. And so if you want to limit your life to, I mean, all my partners in business, they played golf, they chased women, they made a lot of money, they traveled, they had a great life. So why would they want, in their minds, when I would talk about some of the things that I talk to you about, not much, they would think I was just stoned or drunk or something. Why would they give that up? That was their point. Why? I mean, they were having a great time. So if you're having a great time with your life, then go for it. I'm not evangelical. I am not trying to convert anybody to anything, because that's not my commission. My commission is to do what I'm told, to go and advance down this road of wholeness, the pollen path, as Joseph Campbell would say, to go down the pollen path to wherever it takes me. And it could go on for eternity, for all I know. I mean, I have no idea how long it is. Since there's no such thing as mortality or immortality, those things don't exist. There's only existence. That's it. You never were born and you never die. So consequently, if you were never born and you never die, there's only now. That's it. And now goes on and on and on and on and on forever. And you don't have any control over that. I mean, your little ego, you're talking about a giant universe here. It's not very impressive. Your little ego is just not that impressing. And that goes for even the great mystics of all time. They were just guys, just people, women, men, who were mystics and trying to tap into some part mystery of the universe that is a little bigger than a little planet in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this planet is fairly new. It's not very big, number two. its evolutionary history is only a few, 100 million years, hundreds of millions of years old, which isn't very long. And it's in the middle of nowhere on one part of one galaxy. And then they were saying that was like, what did they say? It was like 5 million galaxies or something like that. I mean, it's just staggering. And that's only from this one event of the Big Bang. That's one universe from one, birth of certain particles, like, certain chemicals and certain relationships of those chemicals to create the kind of life that we live. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other creatures with other kinds of chemical compositions that have nothing to do with ours. So there's a lot of assumptions we make about reality that I think are not true. I think they're just ideas.
I'm wondering, since we're on the topic of life and the rest of the universe and all that stuff, how much can you tell us about Zelkon? What it's like there, the beings that live there, plant life? What are we talking about here?
Well, interestingly enough, Zelkon, first of all, has 3 moons. It's the light there is about 50% what it is here and at midday. So it's a little darker than it is here. It's not as bright as it is on Earth. The thing about it is, I have not been able to discover its circumference. So my guess is that it has no circumference, that it's actually
toroidal or something, a different shape.
As big as I want to make it, or as small as I need to make it. Because when I go there, I have some control over how I experience it. Now, and it has these beautiful, incredible blue oceans that are just so mesmerizing. If you look at my paintings, there's blue everywhere because I have synesthesia. And synesthesia, when I hear B flat, I see blue. Okay. I don't know if you know this, but the mystics of old put colors with all of the pitches. There's nothing new about that. I remember when you were talking to Mike about Bach, you realized that there wouldn't be a Bach if there hadn't been Jean-Philippe Rameau. Jean-Philippe Rameau created modern harmony from the old system of harmony, which had nothing, there was no harmony. It was note against note, and the church banned certain intervals, like the fourth. The perfect fourth was banned. And if you put a fourth in your scale, you could be executed for that. I mean, they weren't kidding around. And it was an augmented fourth, the augmented fourth.
The tritone, yeah.
Yes, the thing that's part of Stravinsky's whole Rite of Spring that built the whole piece is that particular interval of the tritone. Well, anyway, so Monteverdi was the Bach before Bach. He was the big guy of the age. And then Jean-Philippe Rameau wrote the treatise on harmony and created what they call the circle of fifths. And you probably know what that is. So from the circle of fifths, Bach wrote the Well-Timbered Clavier. And he did that for his kids, to teach them how to play the harpsichord and the clavichord, because there was no piano. And so from that beginning of harmony, Bach was just knocking it out like right and left. I mean, it was pretty amazing. Anyway, so back to a couple of things about Zelkon that is really interesting is that there is musical sound that plays all the time. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It changes pitch, but it's always playing. Now, it's like it's like a hum, but the vibration of the hum varies in, let's say that A is 440 cents. A on the piano. It's an, that A is 440 cents. This pitch could be A for 448 or 450. But so it's a quarter tone or an eighth of a tone or a 16th of a tone. I mean, we limit our tones to half steps and whole steps, but most of the world doesn't. It's only the Western world that limits it to those things. So on Zelkon, the vibration on Zelkon that creates its own reality, by the way, the vibration on Zelkon that you can feel and actually see in a way. It's a strange kind of seeing. It's not like with your eyes, it's like with your mind. It's a strange kind of seeing that you sort of see the vibration itself, and then you hear the vibration, but not from your ears, but from inside your head. And the rest of the planet is anything that I want to make. It's mountains, there are deserts, there are beautiful forests, there are temples, there are libraries and people where people study. And in fact, all the last series I did on Facebook of paintings that I've done are all about Zelkon. All 78 of them that I just posted are all about Zelkon. So if you want to know what it looks like or how it looks, I painted it because I don't hold anything back. So everything on Zelkon on Facebook is what I have seen as a vision. That's not just art. That is the way I see it. And the thing about the one time I had a really profound experience. I was on Zelkon, and every time we would go there, Charon would go there. She and I, there would be all these groups of two. A person like me and a person like her or him, and they were all over the place. And I said to Charon, I said, "Can we go talk to them? I mean, they're all over the place. They're walking and talking together, but they don't talk to each other. They just talk in groups of two. So can we go talk to them?" And she said, at first, she said, "No, we cannot go talk to them." Now, remember, I told you she gives me information when she thinks I can handle it. And at the time I asked her that, she didn't think I could handle it, so she wouldn't give me an answer. So some years later, we were on Zelkon, and I was seeing all these couples walking around, and I said, "Come on, what are they?" And she said, "It's time for you to know." She said, "Those beings are you and me in different dimensions, times. They could be 1,000,000 years ago. It could be 1,000 years from now. It could have been 100 years, 100,000 years ago. It could be anytime, but they are all us in one dimension or another. If you go over and even touch one of them, they would just evaporate. The whole thing would evaporate." So I went, "Okay, I get it. So what does that tell me? That tells me that I've existed before in other lives, in other universes, in other galaxies. Has nothing to do with Earth. I mean, Earth is passé in a lot of ways because it's not advanced enough. It's just, it's really interesting. When I was studying my favorite Christianity book, and it was about Gnosticism, and the Gnostics believed that Earth was actually hell, and that when you were born here on Earth, you were walking around in hell. You just didn't know that that's where you were. And the first stage of Gnosticism is called the call. That's how they call it, the call. So you get this, you're walking around one day and you go, there's something wrong with this. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong with this place. And I don't feel at home here. There's just something's weird here. That's called the call. And then after you get the call, then there's the next stage, which is the messenger comes. And the messenger comes and tells you, you're not from here. You don't belong here. You weren't ever supposed to be here. You are an exile. This is not a place for you. So that's the second stage. The third stage is release into what I call cosmic consciousness, but they call, the absolute truth of the universe, the absolute beauty and wonder of the majesty of creation. And so you've come from hell and you've been awakened. The awakening is very, very important. And of course, most people don't awaken. There's an old scripture in the Bible that used to really bother me. And it says, many are called, but few are chosen. And I thought, what does that mean? Many are called, but few are chosen. What could that possibly mean? And then years later, when I was reading all these Gnostic texts, I realized exactly what it meant. That the call is always there, and it's always calling you. Doesn't mean you accept it. You just go on with your life, play golf, have kids, have affairs, make money, do whatever you want to do, have a nice life. And I'm not putting that down. I mean, if that's what people want and that's what they want to live and that's how they live, that's fine. But if you're awakened, once you're awakened, you can never close that off. I'm sorry about that, but if you open the door, these people that play around with DMT and all of that stuff, they're playing around like they did in the 60s. They were playing around with stuff they didn't understand. When you open the door, there are times when you can't close it. That means you have to take it all the way. And if you don't take it all the way, like that verse that I told you about, it'll destroy you. It's not malevolent. It's just that it keeps giving you information that you can't handle. And it's not malevolent at all. It's trying to give you the information that you open the door to get, but you're resisting it, so it just destroys you. So I think that once you start on that journey, you can't ever want to go back. You can't go back. You just can't. I mean, God knows I've fallen off the wagon a lot. I've drank. I was in AA. I had a lot of problems with my recovery from the military, and I smoked a lot of dope. I did a lot of stuff, and Karen never, ever, ever, ever said anything about it. And I'd get drunk and I'd wake up the next day and she'd just say, we have things to do today. Let's go to the mountain. That's all she'd say. No judgment, no nothing. So we'd go to the mountain and I would go on some journey. In fact, like one of the most important visions I ever had, well, there are actually two, but one of them, remember, I always thought deep down inside in the back of my mind that maybe I was demon possessed. Maybe there were demons, and maybe I was demon possessed, and I was just in denial about it. And yeah, I had Karen here, but Karen's not going to tell me I'm not demon possessed. That's not her job. So I thought, I would put it away, and I go, well, no, I'm not. But I would think, well, but I drink and I carouse around, and so there's something wrong. There's something wrong with this process. And I was getting to a place where I was getting convinced that maybe the church was right after all. that I was really demon possessed. So one morning, Karen got me up early, about 6 o'clock, and she said, "We're going to the mountain, and we're going now." Now, when she says that, that means it's serious. No games, no laughter. This is serious. So, um, so she took me to the mountain, and we went to this cave that's up there. And she said, "Okay, you're on your own." She's not going with me on this. You're on your own here. So there was, all of a sudden, the cave was full of water, and a boatman came. Now, it wasn't Charon of old. It wasn't the boatman that takes you across the River Styx. It was just a boatman. And the boat came, and the boatman said, "Get in the boat." So I got in the boat, and we sailed down this river. It was very dark in this cave, but on the sides of the walls were all of these beings that were trapped in this wall. They were screaming, and they were bloody, and half their bodies were sticking out, and some of them only their heads. And so we were going, and I tried to ask the boatman about it, and the boatman would not answer me. I mean, that wasn't the boatman's job. So we went down the river, and then when we got further down the river, all of a sudden I saw these harpies. I don't know if you know what harpies are, but harpies are female winged bat-like creatures that they want to just tear you to pieces. That's their nature. Their nature is to destroy. And these harpies wanted to destroy me utterly, but they couldn't do it. Something was stopping them from doing it, because they would come right down with their claws and fly away, like they were told, "No, leave this guy alone." So we got to this dock, and the boatman just pointed out and said, "Get out." So I got out of the boat, and there was this huge wall with a giant door that looked like bronze, but it wasn't bronze. It just looked like bronze. And it was probably 16, 20 feet tall, something like that. And I just opened it. And when I went in there, it was a huge theater filled with millions and millions and millions of people. And they were all in revelry. They were having the greatest time of their lives. They were anticipating something that was supposed to come, that was coming. And I thought, what the hell is this? What am I doing here? And then all of a sudden, way off in the distance, came this creature that was red in color. It wasn't male and it wasn't female, but it had male attributes. It had muscles and stuff, and it was about, I don't know, 20 feet tall or something. But it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I never seen anything like this creature. And he came right towards me. It came right towards me. And the first thing the creature said to me was, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm Myron, and your boatman brought me here." And the creature said, "That's not my boatman, and I didn't bring you here. You have no business being here." And it dawned on me that this was a demon. This was not just any demon. This was a big deal demon. Okay, this is as big as they get outside of the others. So, so I said, "Well, but your boatman brought me here." And he said, "No, this is not a place for mortals, and this is not a place for you." And he was that kind about it. He was really kind about it. And he said, "I'm going to walk you to the boat." So he walked me to the boat. The door opened by itself, and we went over to the boat just came like somebody had called it. And this being said, "I want you to get in the boat, You don't belong here. You have never belonged here. You're not part of this consciousness. You're not demon possessed. Whoever told you that didn't know the truth of things. So get in the boat and leave and never come back, ever. And he kind of patted me on the shoulder. I mean, it was rather touching, actually. I'm kind of emotional about it. So I got in the boat and sailed back out, and Charon was waiting. And Charon said to me, the only thing she said to me was, "Did you get the message?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I did get the message." And she said, "I hope you got the message." And that's all she would say. And when I was doing a painting about it, I thought, that's it. The demon itself said I wasn't demon possessed. And that ended that whole chapter of my psychological evolution. It just shut it down. The demon itself had said, "You're not demon possessed and you do not belong here." Now, I don't believe in demons. I don't believe that they exist. That doesn't mean that psychologically and metaphysically they don't exist. I mean, after all, if you study Hinduism, you know that most of the stuff is karma in Hinduism. So that means it doesn't exist. It's just stuff that people have to deal with in this dimension. But if they cross over into Nirvana, all this goes away. There are no, nothing is in 3 dimensions in Nirvana. It's unification of consciousness. So all of the things that go on here don't go on there. I remember when I was reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead one time, and you go on the Bardo plane. That's what they call it. You go on the Bardo plane and you're walking along, and here comes this monster, and to the degree that you deal with the monster is how you get reincarnated. For instance, if your reaction to the monster is fear and loathing, then that's what you get when you get reincarnated. If your reaction to the monster is, "So you're a monster, big fucking deal, I don't care," boom, you go right by the monster and you go right on down the Bardo plane to enlightenment. So it has to do, you have a choice in your destiny. We all have a choice in our destiny. Now you could say, well, okay, that comes from your Christian background and stuff like that. Well, no, it's more than that. Because even those other incarnations of myself that are on Zelkon, living or dead, well, none of them are dead because nothing ever dies. So, however they're dealing with the realities that they are manufacturing with their companions, even though they're me, these are all me, it's unique to them and to no one else. So your soul is unique to you. You're not responsible for what the Spanish did to the Indians, or what happened in the wars, or Hitler, or any of the rest of it. I know get people pissed off when I say that there is no hell for Hitler. Hitler was already in hell when he was here. When he was doing what he did, he was already in hell. There's no place for him to go once that body is destroyed. So the Jews really get upset when I say that. But the fact is, that's just a fact. And so those kind of visions I've had all my life. Every time I've needed to make the next move, whatever the next move, sometimes it took years, like 8 or 9 years to get to a place where I would have enough, I don't know, enough faith, belief, enough money in the bank to take this on, because a lot of it was very tough. I mean, I was told to leave my job. I was making a lot of money, And Karen said, it's time for you to leave your job and start showing your art and write a book. So I wrote the book. The book's online. It's on my website. It's going to be published this year, but it's on my website and it's free to read. But Karen told me that I had to do that. And I didn't. I wasn't a writer. I wasn't an artist. I couldn't write. I couldn't draw anything. A stick drawing is about all I could draw. When she said to me, get a book and start drawing. So I got a book and started drawing. And the result is what? I've got 7,000 works. I've shown all over the world. I've had shows all over the United States, Buenos Aires, Canada, London, you name it. I've had China. I've had shows all over the world. And it's interesting that if you're following your bliss, whatever you need will come to you. It's kind of like you don't have to go after it. It'll come to you and open the door that you need to go through. You don't have to chase anything around. The things that you're chasing around are little ego things because you want to escalate this. You want to make this faster. Okay, I want to do this faster. That's not how it works. When the thing comes to you and says, we're going to do this, and you do it, it seems like that you'd been working on it for a very long time, but the fact is you hadn't been. The moment it made the decision, it was done. So when I couldn't do music anymore, which that's why I drank so much, because I lost my music. I couldn't play the violin. I couldn't play the viola. I could barely play the piano. I played some, but not very good. My compositions just weren't working. And that's when Karen said, get a book and start drawing. Now, I could have resisted that and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not, my brother was the artist. I'm not the artist. I'm not going to do it. But I did it because I follow what I'm told to do. And the rest is history.
I had kind of assumed that you were drawing maybe the whole time, even when you were learning music as a kid. You mean to say that your chapter as an artist didn't even begin until you left the telecom career? Am I framing that correctly?
No, it started in 1978.
Okay, I'm sorry.
When I did really basic, awful drawings. I mean, really bad. And they were in little tiny books like that. And I would try to draw something, but I couldn't do it. And so I would write most of it down. Like if I was going to describe that vision with the demon, I would write most of it down, and then I would draw a little stick drawing of the demon and say, there's a little place of the amphitheater, and the door or the boatman or something. But I started drawing at 78. In fact, I was looking at some of the drawings that I did in 1978, because what I do is these books here, they're all books, and they're loaded. Mm-hmm. They're loaded with drawings like that. Wow. Thousands of them. They're all visions that I've had over the years. And there are like 6,000 drawings just in the journals. Never mind the paintings, the sculptures, and all the rest of it. But I didn't know how to do any of that. I never went to art school. I never took an art class, ever. I have this thing inside of me that believes that if you're called to do something, you don't have to go to art school. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to do it. But you've got to do the work. People ask me all the time, how could you be 65 years old and you have all over the world? And how did that happen? I mean, that doesn't happen in the real world. You start out by showing a drawing in a little gallery, and then you get maybe 2 drawings in the gallery, and then you get a private show in that little gallery, and then somebody writes a review, and then it's like acting or music or anything else. And that's not how it works. You need 3 things. People ask me all the time, how did this happen? One, you've got to do the work. You've got to do whatever the work is, whether it's building podcasts or it's music or it's whatever it is, you've got to do the work. Second, you've got to do something that nobody else has ever done before. Because if I look like Georgia O'Keeffe, then why buy my stuff when you can buy her stuff, and hers is better than mine? So it's got to be different, very different. Third, you have to know someone. If you don't know somewhere, you're not going anywhere. You're just not going anyplace. And Charon brought to me everybody I needed. I met this friend of mine in the epilepsy group who was an artist. She was really good. And she had some friends that collected art. And it turned out that they were more than collectors. They supported artists. And they had a gigantic collection that was worth, I don't know, $400 or $500 million, something like that. And they knew this guy, Greg Escalante, who came to my place one day at their behest. And I'd known Greg for years, but he thought I was just a businessman. He didn't know I was an artist because I didn't show this to anyone, ever. I was never going to show this art to anybody. What I was going to do is take it to what they call Burning Man and burn it all and send it back to the universe that it came from. That was my plan. Well, that wasn't Charon's plan. Charon wanted this out. So it got out. And so Greg comes here on a Friday night. And I took him downstairs, which is Spook City, if you that's how you see it. It's loaded, it's dark, and it has no natural light, and it's 700 square feet, and it's loaded with sculptures. All kinds of sculptures that I've made.
I think I've seen pictures of that online, right?
Yeah. And it's evolved over the years. It's got different kind. A lot of those pieces are sold, and a lot of them are in museums. But anyway, Greg came here and he walked around and he looked at this and he looked at that, and he didn't say much, And I thought, well, I guess he doesn't like it. I mean, maybe there's nobody says he has to. And so he said, well, thanks for the invitation, and I'll be in touch. Okay, Greg, have a nice life. He was the big art guy. He'd discovered so many people, it was just like endless. So that was Friday. On Monday, he calls me from his office and he said, the reason I didn't say anything is I didn't know what to say. I just didn't know what to say. I'd never seen any art that looks like your art, ever, anywhere. And this guy has seen everything. And he said, absolutely, we'll do a show at Grand Central Art Center with just your works, 75 of them. We'll do a book. So I have the book. It's here somewhere. But anyway, I have the book. I think this might be it. Yeah. Here's the book. Primordial Images of a Modern Mystic. The book's introduction. Yeah, the book's introduction was written by Clive Barker. I don't know if you know who that is.
Oh, I do. He's a famous author. I've read several of his books. Yeah.
Yeah, and he did the Hellraiser series. Well, Clive and I did a show together at Otis Art Center called Two Madmen. That was his title, not mine.
Wow.
And so he and I did a show together. We became very close friends, and he wrote the introduction to this book. She wrote the introduction.
What's that one called again?
Primordial Images of a Modern Mystic.
Sorry, I'm writing it down. I want to get that one.
Yeah,
cool.
it's anyway.
So can I ask? Myron, so your output of creation is like pretty, it's a lot. You're like always producing art. Is there something that drives that urgency? Is it Karen? Like why are you, like, it seems like it just keeps coming, you know?
So, it's really funny. Somebody asked Bach one time where he got his ideas. Okay. And he said, and why do you write so much music? And he said, I couldn't turn it off if I tried. There's so much music in my head, I've got to get it out, and I'll write until I'm dead. And he died in his 80s, and had 20 children, and only 4 of them actually made it to maturation. Most of them died. And Johann Christian Bach actually was a very close friend of Mozart's. That's just one of his sons. Well, anyway, if you have this, it's a drive. It's not. I don't want to use the word obsession because that has a negative connotation. What it is you run into some kind of energy matrix that you don't know, that you don't understand. And then you have a Heros Gamos with it. I don't know if you know what that means, but Heros Gamos means sacred marriage. So you have a Heros Gamos with this thing that you don't know anything about, in this case, Charon. And Charon starts giving you information and things to do. And at first you do them because you're not loved by anyone else, in my case, and you're beaten half to death by your parents, so you don't have anything to do with them. And you're a little weird kid. I was a little weird kid. I'm tall now, but I was short and scrawny when I was young. And so I started listening to my own voices inside, and I loved music so much. Right from the first time I ever heard a perfect third or a major fifth, or I don't give a shit what interval it was, I was in love with it. I had a 45 record player. I don't know if you even know what that is, but there were 45 records. Those were the rock and roll of the 50s. And if you flip it over, there was a rock and roll song on one side and one on the other side. And that was all it was. Then there was LPs, long playing records. And then there was high fidelity. And then there was DVDs or CDs. And I was about 7 years old, and I heard Jascha Heifetz play the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, and I just couldn't believe my ears. I was in it. I was just in it. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard in my life, and I just couldn't stop the sound in my head. So I told my mother, I want to take violin lessons. I want to learn the piano. I want, and I was like 8, 9 years old. And in my day, schools actually had musical classes in them. They don't do it anymore, but they had orchestras for kids. And I mean, nobody cares about the arts anymore. So anyway, so my life was filled with sound. Everywhere I go, I loved jazz. I was 10 years old listening to Miles Davis. I mean, give me a break. 10 years old don't listen to Miles Davis. I wasn't in the Beat generation. And I was born in 1943. So I'm not even a baby boomer because you have to be 49 and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so, but the visual part, I had always seen visions, but I didn't know what I didn't want to record. That wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be playing my musical instruments. And even today, I listen to music, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day. I mean, I just can't not listen to it. And it just tears me up. It's so gorgeous. I listen to music, India, ragas from Ravi Shankar and all kinds of people, and Japanese kabuki music, and I listen to Renaissance and pre-Renaissance and Bach and Debussy and Ravel, and you know that most modern jazz is based on Ravel's chord progressions. He's the one that developed the 11th chord and the 13th chords. Those were all developed by Debussy and Ravel. And Oscar Peterson, I don't know if you know who that is. He's a jazz pianist. He admitted, he said, yeah, when we heard those chords, we went, yeah. That, you know, and then, so they improvised off of the 11th chord and the 13th chord. So when something like that takes you over, it just takes you over. You know, I mean, I couldn't live without music. I think if I went, I don't know how Beethoven did it. I don't know how you could go deaf and be the biggest genius of his age. Go totally deaf at 34, 35. write symphonies. I just don't know how the fuck he did it, or how he, you know, his last words on his deathbed were, at last the comedy is over. That's how bitter he was about what happened to him. I was talking to some doctors a few years ago, and they said, we think we could have cured Beethoven's hearing really easy.
Oh, wow.
But they just couldn't do it then. But didn't make any difference. I mean, his music was incredible. Well, anyway, so the same thing happened with visual stuff. I just couldn't do it. And then when I lost the music, and I kind of lost myself, there's an old expression, you know, I've gone searching for myself and I have gathered myself from everywhere. And so I went searching for myself, and mostly I was going to the mountain and just meditating and looking at the trees and the birds and looking what kind of visions I was having. And then all of a sudden, Karen said, get a book and start drawing. And I couldn't stop. So I remember when I came out, because I didn't tell anybody that I was doing this, from 1978 till I was 65, I didn't tell a soul that I did any art of any kind. No one, except people that live with me. And I did that for a reason. First of all, I didn't want to explain that I had epilepsy. I mean, that would end my career just like that. So I didn't want to talk about that. And but the second I started doing it, I felt like I had come home. That this was a place I needed to be. It was my alchemy. You know, an alchemist works alone. He doesn't work with others. You know, an alchemist works in his lab. I have paintings of myself working in my lab. So after the show in 65, when I was 65, it got reviewed in all the Orange County papers, and all of my colleagues, they looked at the review and they go, are you the Myron they're talking about in this review? You know, and I said, yeah, I'm afraid I am that guy. And they went, what? You're that Myron Dyal? I said, yeah, I'm afraid I am. And that was really the end of my career. My partners and I had a kind of divorce because I did have seizures, and they were. It was a marriage breakup. There were 3 of us that were partners, and we broke up. And they bought me out, and I left. Besides, I wanted to leave anyway. I wanted to go full time into art, not doing art, showing art, and then doing art as well. So, like this afternoon, I'll finish a piece that I'm working on after this is over. And I just did, 4 more in this last 3 or 4 days. And I get prints of them, and they're in books like these, if you can see that. And they're 11 by 14, most of them. And this is a complete record of all the visions that I've had in the last, couple of months. So the book I wrote, The Boy That Nobody Wanted, which is going to be published, I hope. Anthony wanted to publish it himself because he quotes my book in 3 of his books. He quotes my experiences in 3 of his books, especially in Doors of Perception and The Hidden Universe. I'm in there's a whole chapter to me in those books. Anyway, I think that when you're driven to something, whatever, something artistic or something creative, you can't unplug it. I mean, if you're doing it for money, fame, I don't know, ego, then you can leave it anytime you want. But if it's part of your soul, part of your, what you could call your process, if it's part of your evolution, psychologically and physically and spiritually, then you can't stop. Like I told you, once you open the door, I opened the door. Once I opened the door, I couldn't unopen it. You can't unopen something that's open. So I just kept doing it and working and working and working and working and working and working. And my partners would say, when did you do all this? I said, when you guys were playing golf, I was working on my art. Yes, we're going on vacation. I was working on my art. That when you guys, and on and on and on and on, and people ask me all the time, especially I was on an old podcast called with a friend of mine, this guy Paul, and Perceptions Today was the name of it. And
yeah, Paul's a friend of this channel too, by the way. That's who set this up. So yeah,
he's a great guy. He's a great guy.
He's the best.
Anyway, yeah, he is, absolutely. He and I talk all the time, and I was telling him, that that the life that I have internally, the spiritual visionary life that I have, is more important to me than anything else. I don't concern myself much with politics. I don't concern myself much with issues. I don't, because I can't do anything about them anyway. What am I going to do? I'm not a billionaire. I can't stop the world from turning. There's nothing I can do, but I can follow my bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say. So I'm following my bliss, and my bliss is taking me where I need to go. And one day that road will run into, when this body dies, I go into cosmic consciousness, or wherever I go, because I really don't care. I'll just go on. Those beings on Zelkon will go on doing what they're doing, and they're me anyway. So I have no fear of death at all, and I've come close many times. Many times I've come close to dying, and I have no fear of death at all. I mean, none. I couldn't care less. Besides, I'm 81. I'm going to die soon anyway. This body is, but this part of me that's part of cosmic consciousness, like I said, was never born and is never going to die. Something can't die that was never born. And go ahead.
This whole idea of cosmic consciousness is reminding me a lot of a book that I read, as well as your accounts of Zelkon. Reminding me of a book that I read that's basically a compilation of past life regressions. It's by a hypnotherapist named Dolores Cannon. Have you ever had hypnotic regression therapy? I mean, that's typically for people who aren't having visions already, but is it something you've ever looked at?
Yeah, but I do that on my own. Charon takes me all those journeys are all orchestrated by her in her time or his time or its time. I don't need to go out and, I mean, I have thousands of books that I read in the 60s, Robert Monroe's book and all of that stuff that everybody's rereading now. I went through all that in the 60s. I read everybody I could read, and I couldn't find anything in those books that I didn't already experience. I just couldn't find anything new about them. There were some things that were new, and a lot of it's really beautifully written. And I mean, I love the I Ching, and stuff like that. Interestingly enough, I had one hell of a time going out of body. It took me. I failed the first time. I could go out of body and walk down the street, but if I was going to turn right, let's say, I would have to click my mind. I was going this way, now I'm going that way. Well, that's not out of body. That's you tricking your mind that you're going this way and now you're going that way. And then not very long ago, about 2 years ago, I could all of a sudden be walking down the street and just make a right turn, just like it was 50, 100, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, whatever. And that's when it started. Then my out-of-body stuff started ubiquitous. It was just always there. And I could go out of body and go back to places. I used to go to this swimming pool that they had here. And I remember one of the things I liked most was swimming in the cold water and laying on the surface of the tile and how it warmed up my body while I was laying on it, how great that felt. So I went back and did it, and my body actually turned red. So in some way, either psychologically, physiologically, or spiritually, I'd been there, or I had convinced my body to turn red with my brain. However you want to explain it, that's your problem, not mine. But I don't mean you. I mean whoever's listening to this. I was there, and I could go to multiple places. I could go any place I wanted to go, and then I was really free. Then I could travel. There was no limit to where I could go. And you see, what's interesting about my conflict, I have this real conflict about UFOs and all that stuff. I'll be candid with you about it. And I can't believe that something can come across 900 million light years and then be so bad it crashes, like Roswell. This pilot is so bad it can cross 900 million years of star systems and then crash. No, I ain't buying that one. But the thing that I do buy, no pun intended, is that you can download consciousness. That I believe. I think that they could download consciousness into my brain and I would be them.
Yep.
Because what's the difference between Charon, who is not, it's not an earthly being. It's more cosmological than it is earthly. So what's the difference between that and me accepting that you could transmit cosmic energy across time and space instantaneously? So there is no delay of, it would be if Orion were to go nova tomorrow, it would take 1 million years for it to destroy this planet, because it would. Okay. But that's how far away it is. I mean, it's a long way off. Okay. I mean, we just have no idea how much time and space and how big it is. But if you go out of body and you just cosmologically travel, I can be on the beaches on Zelkon and I can talk to you and be there as well. I can do both. like I'm on there. I'm there right this minute. No,
It's probably kind of rudimentary, Myron, but like, do you think quantum entanglement has anything to do with that as a rudimentary explanation?
I think that when you're a young child, you play with toys, and you love your toys, and you believe in your toys, and you like your toys. And I think that's what science is. They love their toys. They love their explanations. I was listening to a Nobel Prize physicist the other night from London, and he was saying, he was asked that question, will we ever understand the universe? And his answer was, his answer was, we're not smart enough. We're not even close to being smart enough. The answers that we have come, this is a Nobel Prize winning physicist who won the Nobel Prize for physics, and just not very long ago. And I think that when you play with blocks in a crib, and you put the things together and you make these things and they work, and you say, see, this looks like a building. This is a building.
Right.
And that's how I see science. And I'm not saying that science isn't part of the contribution of understanding things. But if like for instance, how many years did it take them to abandon string theory? I mean, yeah, now they've tried
Like
to
40?
stick it with something else. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they realize string theory doesn't work. Oh, great. You know, Tyson or somebody had like 4 of these scientists, and their whole life was studying string theory. And they all had to admit it didn't work. What didn't work wasn't the explanation, it was the math. They couldn't get the math to work, and they tried everything to do it. So now they're going to try to stick something else onto it. Well, maybe that'll help. But, you know, I'm sorry.
So something like the Large Hadron Collider, I'm imagining as like just us as babies with building blocks. You know what I mean?
Well, it's fascinating. I'm not saying it's not fascinating, you know,
Sure.
and that, I mean, when I was young, an atom was as small as you could get. That was it, you know, an atom. And now that, you know, where there's quarks and, I mean, it's incredible that there's not a thing in this room that's real. So then people tell me that my visions are crazy or something. And I go, well, wait a minute. There's not this whole wall isn't even here, because it's made up of atoms that go into infinity. So that's not possible that this isn't even here. This is a reductive, you know, of interpretation of something. So
the atoms
how are
aren't
you
even
gonna,
actually touching each other. You know what I mean?
yeah, right. You know, and if the atoms were not, you know, they keep themselves from connecting. They have this little thing between them, and not atoms, these quarks, these small particles.
Yeah.
If that didn't work, that would be the end of everything in a second. So I am not putting science down. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I think it's fascinating, and I read a lot of books on it. I think a lot of it's bullshit, and I think a lot of it's really, in science, it's a step forward. You know, I mean, and this, I feel the same thing.
As far as answering the great questions of the universe, we're not even close. We're playing with building blocks, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't buy that.
I think you're right that scientific thinking is very important. It's something we all need to do together, think scientifically, and scientific progress has happened. But science isn't some authority figure or authority institution that has completely figured everything out. That's not science.
No, not hardly. And I think that if you get them alone and get them drunk They'll give it to you straight. Because I used to do that with when we go back to these big meetings in New York for the Epilepsy Foundation. I get all these neurologists who are supposed to be the best in the world. These are the best neurologists in the world. And I would say to them, I'd get them drunk. We'd have dinner and we'd be drinking. And I'd go, so tell me, doctor, how does the brain work exactly? What is consciousness? How is it that I can have a seizure and be out for 8 hours in another dimension? How's that possible? Tell me, doctor, how's that possible? And they would say, we don't know. We don't have a clue. We have no idea. But you get them sobered up, back in their element, and they make up all kinds of, presuppositions about stuff. And again, I am not putting them down. They have saved a lot of lives. Okay. They didn't help me.
That's how we're talking right now, right? With our across the internet, right? It's
exactly. I mean, think about it. When I was growing up, this didn't exist. The only way I could have a conversation like this would be like some friends of mine who were at seminary, and we got into arguments whether there was a Jesus and whether there was a God and whether there, all that kind of stuff. Or like I remember one time I was living in this town, and they had a little book stand, which almost no bookstores anymore. Now there's Amazon, and I bought this book called Explanation of Relativity by Einstein. I didn't look at it. I just bought it. And Bob, the guy that owned the store, he said, "You sure you want this?" And I said, "Yeah, it says, I want to read about relativity." So I bought it, got it home. I looked at it. It was all equations. I mean, there was the and perhaps and stuff like some adverbs. But so I went right back to the bookstore and I said, "You're right, I fucked up. This is the wrong book. I didn't understand a thing in this book." He said he wrote 2 books. He wrote an analysis of relativity. Here's the book you're looking for. I said, "Then why didn't you tell me that in the first place?" You said, "Well, you understood it, but I didn't know what I was saying." So then I read that book on relativity that Einstein had written, and that got me hooked. I was really hooked on physics by that time, and I'm still hooked. I listen to podcasts all the time. You guys, when you guys had, was it Anthony? No, you had. I forgot who it was you had on. God, I see so many podcasts, I can't keep them straight. But I was listening to a podcast, and it was all science. It wasn't just Sam Harris, because Sam Harris is not a physicist. But it was a bunch of physicists talking, and I was, and I don't live very far from one of the main hubs of scientific investigation, and they have open house from time to time, and they answer questions as candidly as they can, and but you get the feeling that they're just groping in the dark. Right. They don't even know what 94% of the universe. Now, if you don't know what if I don't know what 94% of what I am is, then I got a problem. I mean, you got to give me something here, guys. That's a big percentage.
Carl Sagan said that science is like a candle in the dark. I guess if you got a really big dark room, the only thing that you can see is the candle in front of you. That's the only thing you can clearly make out is the candle itself. You brought it in.
That's right. He's right. I mean, I think most scientists that are really honest about neurologists, there are a lot of neurologists who think they know everything and they just blab, and they tell their patients and their patients' parents all kinds of bullshit, and it's just not true. I remember I was responsible. We have this children's camp for kids who have epilepsy who can't go to YMCA camps or Boy Scouts. Well, there's no Boy Scouts anymore. Now it's all of us Scouts. But anyway, he was giving a lecture to parents. So we had like 400 kids there. So we had the parents there. And this doctor was explaining to the parents what epilepsy was and what it represented for their children and all kinds of stuff. And I was listening to him talk, and I thought, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I know it. I have it. You can't tell me that what I have isn't right, because I already know it. So when it was all over, I walked up to him and I said, what you just told those people is absolute bullshit. He goes, well, who are you? I said, that's not the point. The point is, doctor, you better get your act together, because what you just told them, I know isn't true. I experience it. You don't. So what's true? And he didn't know that I wrote his check. So he came to get paid, and I'm writing his check, and he went, oh. I said, yeah, oh, here's your check. Don't bother to come back. Not unless you get unless you get your act together.
I've heard doctors say stuff to me, to my face, that I straight up know isn't true. But I remember growing up in the 90s as a child. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I was born in 82. And there was this sort of, I wouldn't call it a dogma, but people just, trusted that if he's a doctor, she's a doctor, so this must be the right answer. But as an adult dealing with my own health challenges, I've started to learn that I can take what some doctors say and some of my own research, but the truth doesn't come from like a human who puts their pants on just like me. You know what I mean? And I feel that way about scientists as well. And you mentioned Sam Harris, and I wanted to ask you quickly, with your experiences with your visions and your life experience, how do you feel about Sam Harris's take on free will? Sam Harris likes to say that free will is not real. It's in our imagination, or it's just, and we're just neurons and synapses and stuff like that firing, and we really have no choice. How do you feel about that?
Well, I listen to Sam Harris quite a bit because
me too.
I like him. He's smart. He does a lot of political stuff, which I don't listen to much, but because that doesn't get me any good. I just get depressed. But as far as free will and all of that sort of thing, again, that's just Sam Harris's opinion.
Sure.
I don't care what his opinion is. I'm not looking for a guru. Okay.
Right.
That's what people are doing. They're looking for a guru that tell them the way things are. I'm not looking for that. All right. There are things that Harris says that I like a lot. There are things that he says I think is bullshit. There are things that he says that is way over my head. I mean, he's very smart, no question about it.
Yeah.
And but that doesn't mean he's right. And it doesn't mean it's right for me. My experiences are not Sam Harris's experiences. If he had to live in my brain for 24 hours, he'd lock himself up. He could not deal with it. He could not deal with seeing visions always. He could not deal with it. He would have to put himself on medication. He would try everything to block it. I mean, all kinds of stuff, get into it and maybe actually change. So again, I respect intelligence, but intelligence can be wrong. Really wrong. And
with Sam, I found myself doing that in my late 20s and early 30s, looking for something to explain, what was going on in my life. And I took a course of his, which was very long and extensive, on mindfulness and meditation, and it really taught me a lot. So I was thinking, not in a guru type way, but more like, Sam has it figured out, right? But then as I started listening to him more and more and more, I started realizing, wait a second, he doesn't have it figured out. And then it's where I am now today at 43. I realized no one has it figured out, right? But when you're younger, you really do want, you really do want an explanation. You want somebody who's further down the path to you to go, don't worry, I've got all the answers, right? And I've learned to when people say that, they're either they believe it or they're a charlatan, you know. But either way, it's not true. They don't have it figured out. They're just a human, right?
I don't have problems with growth. Okay, I mean, what I believed when I was 16, some of it I still believe, but most of it I don't. What I believed in my 30s and 40s, which was much more advanced, some of it I still believe and some of it I don't. When I was with Jung and read everything the man ever wrote, I was a Jungian, quote unquote. And then I realized, oh God, I'm a Jungian. You know, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to follow what this guy preaches. First of all, I mean, some of it is I kept. Some of it I kept. I like the anima, animus, the male and the female, and the female and the male psyche. I like that. There are certain aspects of what he taught that I kept. The rest of it, I let it go. It's too simplistic. It's too reductionist. It's just enough. And he was a genius. No question about it. The man was a genius. So was Freud. Freud was a genius. But Freud was wrong. You know, I mean, so what? I mean, you know, but I doesn't mean I have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The things that, there's a great book, I don't know if you know it, it's called, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill him. I don't know.
No, I've never heard of it.
It's a 60s book. And what it means is, at some point, you have to become the Buddha. That's what the book means. You can't just follow the Buddha. At some point, you have to say, hey, the Buddha's dead. I'm the Buddha. I've become the Buddha. And in Siddhartha, a book by Hermann Hesse, I don't know if you know who Hermann Hesse is, but he's a writer, a Nobel Prize winning writer. You know, he wrote this book called Siddhartha, which is, you know, the Buddha. And at some point, he has a friend, Govinda, and he wrote, this is not the myth of Siddhartha. This is a book written by a German in 1920s and 30s, but it's a brilliant book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And Govinda was with Siddhartha, and finally he decided that he listened to this guru teaching, and he wanted to go where that guy was going. He wanted to go that direction, and he didn't want to go where Siddhartha was going, because Siddhartha wasn't buying any of it. And so he went to this guru, and then at the very end of the book, they come back and meet again. And he said, and Siddhartha said to Govinda, I was wondering how long it would take you to leave me and go somewhere else and go on your own journey. And I'm glad that you did that, because now you found yourself. And that's, I think, people they want simple answers. They want comfortable answers. They want them quick, especially a culture like this that is so, God, at light speed. You know, they want
your side.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Don't question anything too hard. Just keep going, keep staying busy. It's the most important thing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And if that has to go. You have to give that up in order to do what I do. You just have to give that up. Like you guys are starting this podcast. Great. You know, and it may grow and grow and grow and become this really big thing, or it may not. Who knows? It doesn't make any difference. What matters is that you're doing it and you're contributing to things now. This is now. There isn't tomorrow. You don't even know there is a tomorrow. You don't even know what it is, never mind whether it's going to be there or not. Maybe tomorrow is already over and you've already lived this life. Maybe it's all done. Okay. But you don't know that. So this is what you have to live in at the moment. Like me, I have to live now with all of my problems with my body and all the stuff that I have problems with at my age, even though I'm pretty healthy, consider I'm 81. But the fact is that If you go with your bliss, as Campbell, I just quote that man all the time. If you go with your bliss will take you where you need to go. And sometimes it means you have to leave people behind and ideas behind. I grew up in the church. I loved the church, but it didn't work. When I left the church, I was on the staff, the music staff at Church on the Way. It's a big church here in the San Fernando Valley. And I went to the main minister and I said, Jack, I got to go. I'm sorry. It's not working. Christianity just doesn't work. It's not true. And then I quoted a scripture from Corinthians. When I was a child, I thought as a child, I understood as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things and I left. So that was a hard decision. It cost me my marriage because my wife was very involved with the church and all that kind of stuff at the time. But I had to go for me. I had to go for what Charon was telling me to do. And the church was not going to be a place where that would work. There was once a guy, Thomas Merton, I don't know if you know who he is, but Thomas Merton is a very famous writer, poet, Nobel Prize winner, I think. But he was a Jesuit priest. And of the last 15 or 20 years of his life, he went to Japan and he got permission from, the Pope, because he was very famous, to go to Japan to go into a meditation place and just meditate the way the Japanese meditate, their Buddhist ideas. No Christianity, just meditation. So Merton goes in there and he's there years, because there's no, he doesn't have to make a living or anything. He's just, and when he came out, he wrote a book about it. And so the Pope read the book and he said, you can't let this out. You can't let this book be published. And Merton said, why not? I mean, it's true. He said, and the Pope said, it has nothing to do with what's true. This book negates the authority of Rome, of the church. It gives people a path where they don't need us. I can't allow that to happen. You're a Jesuit. You're a priest. You got no business writing a book like this, because he found in meditation with those monks an eternal truth inside of himself that had nothing to do with dogma, nothing to do with stories or dogma or any. And Sam Harris is doing the same thing. When I mentioned Sam Harris, it occurred to me that when I first saw him ever, he never mentioned meditation or anything, just all of his ideas about atheism and all that stuff.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, like a lot of these guys, they start meditating. And that is the way out. I mean, David Lynch meditated every day of his life. He even had an online meditation thing that you could join. And he was
Sam Harris has an app.
Yes, see? All right. It's really interesting. These guys who deny everything, they end up meditating, and it changes them. Okay? And the same thing happened because he told the Pope, he said, look, I can't say that these people are out of touch with reality. As a matter of fact, I would have to say they're more in touch with reality than we are. And the Pope said, you can't say that. You can't put that in a book and have it, published by the Vatican. You can't do that. And he said, well, it's done. The book's written. And he said, look, do me a favor. I'll let you get away with it, but you can't publish until 25 years after your death. And he said, "Okay, I'll go along with that," because he was a Jesuit. I mean, he was a priest. He said, "Okay, 25 years after my death," and sure enough, I mean, it got published. But the fact is, he went to find truth, and he found a truth for him that worked. And that's all you can do. What else can you do? We're a little nothing in the middle of nowhere on a little tiny planet, but our consciousness is universal. It's as big as the universe, if you want to make it that way. That's up to you. And that's not an ego statement, because you'll realize that once you realize that, your ego just disappears. It doesn't. There's nothing in it. There's. I don't know how to.
He went out east as a Jesuit priest, but what he really discovered was the truth that the early Gnostic Christians knew the whole time.
Absolutely. And of course, you think that the Roman Catholics don't know that? The Vatican Library.
Why did they persecute the Gnostics? Why did they censor
They have
all
the original texts of all of that stuff. If you could get into the Vatican Library, you could find out stuff from the 1st century that would just blow your mind. You know that Zoroastrianism, I don't know if you know what that is, but Zoroastrianism had a main god up here, and then a demagogue here and a demagogue here, one evil, one good. It's the foundation of Christianity, and it's 5,000 years older. And it's the same story. It just happens to be in Mesopotamia instead of Rome or in Israel. I mean, it's the same. Those myths have always existed, and those stories are old. I mean, you probably know that the flood story did not start with the Bible. It started with the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a metaphysical. It's a very famous story about this guy who goes on a pilgrimage to find himself, and there's a flood. There's a Noah. I mean, all of that is in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Israelites just took that and stuck it in their Bible as a nice little story that Yahweh had something to do with. I mean,
Abraham would have learned the story and then taken that would have been his Bible, his training, and then that became shaped by later on with the Yahweh faction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have a problem with any of that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like anything, we learn by expanding our stories. Okay? And that includes physics. I mean, we're expanding our stories every year. I mean, think about it. We split the atom when I was, 3 years old? Something like that. They split the atom. Before that, there was no such thing as nuclear fission. It didn't exist. Okay? So from the time I was like 2 or 3 years old, look where we are with the collider and subatomic particles and. I mean, we've come a long way just in my lifetime. Just in my short little lifetime. My grandfather put stripes on wagon wheels. That's how he made a living. He was born in 1881.
Wow.
He went from that to seeing people land on the moon. And yes, people landed on the moon. I mean, that bullshit about they didn't land on the moon is total bullshit. They landed on the moon. My dad worked on the missiles, so I know that they landed on the moon. But
the fake moon landing stuff is fun. It's entertaining. I find far more entertaining the notion of secret moon missions, that there were actually far more moon missions than what the public was informed about. To me, that's a whole more
that may
interesting
be
aspect.
true. And the Chinese might have done a lot more. I don't know. All I know is that there was a landing on the moon. My grandfather never believed it. He saw it on TV. He was 100 years old at the time. And I said, "Yeah, Grandpa, that's 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 our astronauts that are landing on the moon. And he went, no, that's just television. That's just television. I said, no. Well, it's television, but it's not television. I mean, they're really landing on the moon. I mean, but anyway, think about it. In 100 years, my grandfather went from horse and buggy to people landing on the moon. In my lifetime, we've gone to the atom to AI, which is just getting started, and God knows where that's going to go. I mean, that could wipe us out. I mean, we could be totally transformed.
Yeah, I was getting into how powerful that AI actually is, and I don't think anyone has any idea where it's going. No one's stopping it. It's just they're going to keep on building it and developing it. So we're going to find out whether it's going to be good or bad, whether we like it or not.
Even crazy Elon Musk is saying, slow it down. It down. Much as I don't like him, the fact is that God knows what's going to happen. All those science fiction things of the 50s where the robots take over everything, like Blade Runner and all that stuff. That's coming true. I mean,
it reminds me. I just saw some new cameras out of my street. I ain't gonna bring it up, but I saw some new cameras. Big Brother's real, folks. I took some pictures. I took a video of the camera. I looked right at it. It was recording me, so I decided to record it.
I saw a robot literally today. I saw it not in person, but online. I saw a robot in a demonstration. A humanoid robot kind of lose its shit and attack people in a crowd, and they had to pull it back. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, I'm gonna show it on the live stream on Thursday night, but it was. I will. We're running out. We're pushing 3 hours. I got to use the restroom too, but I wanted to mention a few kind of highlights of the show, and kind of your message. One of the things you've said repeatedly: follow your bliss.
Yes, that'd be a good title.
In the moment, that's definitely going to be it. The title of the episode. Also, the idea of our cosmic consciousness, like when this is over, this body's over, we make it to this cosmic consciousness. I like the sound of that. And one of the things that my takeaway from talking to you, and this has been like a mind-blowing discussion for me. I want to rewatch this again and really think about some of the things that you had said. But one of the things takeaways for me is just in relation to what we're doing with this podcast is do the work. And you said be different, which is what we're trying to do. But I couldn't remember the third one. Do the work, be different, and what's the third part?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to
know somebody.
Work,
that was it.
Know somebody.
That's it. Somebody. And you guys are beginning to know people. I mean,
yes,
Paul,
which is really cool. Paul, Ricardo from History, Myths, and Legends. When we started this, the reason we're here even talking to you is because of that last concept. We've been doing the work. We've been trying to be different, but we've been meeting people who have been connecting us to people, amazing people like you and other people who have been on the show. And so I'm really going to hold that, those three principles and see how far that takes us, how far we can follow our bliss that way, because this is really fun for me.
We're
this has been a really fun interview.
We're following our bliss. Both Dave and I have been,
no matter how small,
casually reading about
this, whether it's an hour or what, post it on my Facebook, post it on YouTube, and anywhere you want to post it, so it doesn't matter to me. I mean, Anthony's stuff is all on my website, and so is Paul's. Paul put that whole thing on my website too. But put it on Facebook because people look at my Facebook a lot, or Instagram, either one.
Yeah,
because I think
that you need again, you need exposure, and and you need people with specific information that I don't have, that is just as valid and just as interesting as what I just said. And those people need to be found. And I mean, I know a lot of them, and I know Paul knows tons of them, and Anthony knows a ton of them. And you should definitely keep in touch with Peak. he's doing his own thing, but he's having problems. But the fact is that he knows he's got 14 books or something, 15 books that he's published in his lifetime, and they're all going to be at Contact in the Desert. I mean, I
We'll
can't
be there
go.
too.
Yeah, I heard that. I wish I could go, but I can't. But he and I were supposed to do a thing together where we were going to talk sort of on two sides. In other words, we were going to be adversarial and and agreeable, and that would have been fun. But that was right before COVID hit, and then I went 2 years ago, and he showed one of my. But I have a longer film that's streaming called Charon, and it's on. I don't know. It's on some platform.
It's on Vimeo, I think. I watched it this morning. It's on Vimeo.
Is it?
I think we should.
Well, there's
take
a short one. There's a really short one that is only like 5 minutes. There's two of them. One of them is a student film, and then there's another one that isn't much longer, minutes long, but it won the St. Louis Film Festival and was nominated for an Oscar, I think. No, I didn't have anything to do with that. I was just the guy. It's just about me. But anyway, yeah, I think that, everybody needs to follow their bliss. And if you guys do that, it'll take you wherever it needs to take you. Whether this is the place where you really need to go or more or someplace else, that's up to you. It's up to your spirit guides. Because, I mean, like I said, I'm not evangelical, but I think that everybody has access to a higher self, higher than their consciousness. I don't think there's anybody that. I know that anybody who meditates, including Sam Harris, knows that that's true. That the more you open yourself up to the eternal universe, the more it comes to you. It's kind of like it's always looking for receptive people, and it's not an ego thing. It's just hungry to give and give and give and give and give and give. All it wants to do is give more and more information, and we're barely monkeys.
And
we're
you're absolutely
it's just
you're absolutely right.
I mean, so
Dave
I don't take
I
any.
have been passionate about learning about consciousness and pursuing these topics. I've had some periods of my time where I was a little more career focused, let's say, but unraveling these mysteries of consciousness has been something I'm interested in since I was a teenager, since I was old enough to realize that there's more to it than the cartoon version of things. So by bringing you on the show today, I feel like we're accomplishing that, and we're in our place of bliss. This is really cool. And it's been fascinating to learn from everything that you told us. I had an idea a little while ago. I think we should take the transcript of this show and convert it into Morse code, and then maybe have a telegraph podcast. Maybe we send it to people on faxes. I wonder if there's an audience for that.
Oh, that'd be cool. Well, there's all the people that I've got 2,700 people just on my Facebook, but it's not,
Well, we'll be sure to post it there too. And we're also going to add some of your art from your website.
Yeah, do that. Pick anything you want.
We'll go. Yeah.
Pick anything you want.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. All right. The images vary, but they're all the same thing. I mean, they're all giving me information that I need to go to the next level, whatever that is. Yeah. And that's what I'm working on now with these new images. When I get to 100 of them, I'll be ready to publish them.
We look forward to staying connected, and we'll be on the lookout for a new publication. We're about to wrap things up. We're about out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to cover today? Anything you got, Dave? This has been a blast.
The only thing I have is that my book, The Boy That Nobody Wanted, will probably be out this year. And again, if people want to read it, it's free and it's on my website. You can download it if you want to. Anthony did. And because I'm not in this to make money, so I really don't care about the money. And then I have these final series of images that have to be completed. There's going to be about 100 of them. I'm at 78, I think now. And so and those are all about Zelkon and what
awesome
is possible about Zelkon, what I see when I go there, all that kind of stuff. And I post those every day. When I do one, I post it on Facebook. And those can be downloaded
I was looking
too.
at those.
Yeah, those are.
Yeah,
those
we'll
are
definitely
all,
work those in. I was going to say we'll definitely work those into the editing process. We're going to post this. This interview will be on Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble for people to watch. But we'll also post it on X and Facebook, and we're also going to make a bunch of shorts about it. So we'll put those everywhere as well. So
it has been a blast getting to know you today, Myron. Thanks for coming on the show. We really had a fun time talking.
Well, I know that, when I looked at your guys, I looked at almost all the ones you have posted, all of the podcasts, and I thought, I like these guys. They're open and people are hard to come by. They're not as easy as you think. People are very opinionated about what they believe, and they're not very tolerant. And I don't want to get any fights. And I'm not, like I told you, I'm not evangelical. I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm telling you what I experienced and how I experienced it, and that's all it is. I'm not putting anybody down ever. So, congratulations to your endeavor, and I hope it goes big time for you.
Thank you so much. That coming from you, that's a really big deal, because Mike and I really do try our best to be open-minded, and we try to make this fun, and we try to have people from all different opinions and walks of life on the show. And that's what the multiverse is about, my friend. So thank you for joining the multiverse, Myron. You're
and I like the title. I love the title.
Thank you.